Our next discussion is a fireside chat called Medical Progress Redoubled, Forging Multi-Sector Partnerships. We're pleased to have our moderator, Rapp, who is Managing Director of RiverVest Venture Partners, and I'm pleased to say a Research America board member, Akiko Otani, Senior Director for Public and Private Partnerships and Global Science Policy at Takeda, and Dr. Edward Neilan, Chief Medical and Scientific Officer at the National Organization for Rare Diseases, or NORD. Derek, I'm pleased to turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everybody. We're glad that you can join us today. As we all know, throughout the research and development continuum, there are many steps and therefore many relationships, both formal and informal. These relationships are critical for successful product development. In this session, we'll focus on public-private partnerships with representatives both from industry and a patient group. And with that, I welcome Akiko and Ed, and glad you can join us for this discussion. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Derek.
Akiko, why don't we turn to you at Takeda to talk to us a little bit about even what a public-private partnership is. Help us get level set on this, please.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and thank you for this great opportunity to speak at this wonderful forum. So the public-private partnerships that we'll be discussing in today's discussion are the partnerships that are bringing together a multitude of stakeholders from both the private sector as well as the public sector. And those public sector partners include not just government agencies, but also patient organizations, non-governmental organizations, and others. And so we're talking about these large collaborations that are really bringing together partners across that spectrum of public and private sectors in the pre-competitive space. I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Ed, anything you want to add to that from your perspective?
No, I think that was a good level setting definition and start to things.
So how do these relationships, let's start with how do these relationships come about? Is it an organic process? Do you strategically upfront say this is something we want to make happen in a particular sector? Tell us a little bit about how this happens, both of you.
Would you like?
Well, I think NORD welcomes being involved in the right public-private partnerships. We've occasionally sought them out, but I think at least an equal number of times we are approached about a public-private partnership within the rare disease space. And there is some organic development. So for example, one of the public-private partnerships that NORD is currently engaged in is the Medical Device Innovation Consortium, a public-private partnership that's been active for nearly a decade. And NORD's CEO, Peter Saltonstall, had previously done some work in the device area, and that was probably part of the nidus to kick that off. But NORD was at first the only patient group involved in that industry and government consortium.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And from the industry perspective, Akiko?
Yeah, I think it actually happens organically as well as others approaching you. So Takeda is part of about 100 these large collaborations across the world, across all of the therapeutic areas that we're focused in. And because of that, we're connected into many projects and many partners, over 1,000 actually partners connected in these networks. And because of that, we are often approached when there's an opportunity, a new innovative idea that a partner is interested in trying to advance, we will be approached knowing that we have strategic interests in these areas. But then also, more organically, our scientists will identify challenges that they face, and that a consortium of partners, both representing public and private, could really help to advance this research and the science. And so then we will be proactive in seeking out like-minded partners who could work with us and work closely with us to really advance the research that needs to be done to address some of these really complex scientific challenges that we face.
And Akiko, my understanding from our discussions has been that in many cases, you're trying to answer more fundamental science questions as opposed to trying to advance a specific product opportunity, a lead or something. Is that right?
It's because it's all taking place in that pre-competitive space. We're all very much coming to the table to share and to contribute. We have partnerships that span the whole drug development life cycle, from basic scientific research all the way through influencing policy. And so that's one of the reasons why at Takeda, public-private partnerships and our global science policy colleagues sit on the same team, because EPPs is a great vehicle for helping to be part of that conversation and to shape the ecosystem.
Ed, what are ingredients or elements that you look for when trying to form such a relationship?
I think that it's important that there be a willingness to share, as Akiko already mentioned. To me, one of the biggest advantages of a public-private partnership is, breaking down silos that might otherwise exist. And so it's important to ideally enter into public-private partnerships where your partners are willing to be transparent and share, and that moves things ahead the fastest.
Yeah, and I would add that I think trying to achieve that strategic alignment amongst all the key stakeholders is a really critical part of these large collaborations, and really ensuring that they advance and progress. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity where we have many different stakeholders across many sectors, right, that are at the table. And it's really tapping into that pool of resources, whether they be expertise and knowledge, samples, data. It's really harnessing the potential of that pool of resources, where together we're able to advance the science and the research that needs to be done.
Yeah. And from my experience, I would say that having complementarity among the different members of a consortium is an important element to bringing in the different perspectives and hopefully even different scientific disciplines to make sure that you're really coming at a problem or from different perspectives.
I would agree.
Yeah. What are some of the advantages do you feel of this sort of relationship as opposed to just doing it in a more insular fashion? Akiko, I'll start with you and then Ed.
Okay. Well, I think the advantages or the benefits, I like to think of them as, can really be looked at from the patient perspective as well as from our scientists or people perspective. For the patients, of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's really trying to advance the science so we can accelerate getting transformative, innovative medicines to the patients quicker. And in order to do that, as I mentioned, having a seat at the table and being able to connect directly with the opinion leaders, the patient organizations, the academic research institutions, our pharma industry partners, biotechs, other partners, the regulators, having that opportunity to directly connect with them and have those conversations to really understand and deepen the knowledge and understanding about the complex scientific challenges we face. And then also to truly understand and hear from the patients, what are their needs? What are they looking for? What do they want is really, really critical. And so I think the benefits of these large collaborations is the fact that we're able to bring such a diversity of expertise and stakeholders and thought that can really help to propel that innovation so that we can accelerate getting the transformative medicines to patients. But I also want to highlight another benefit for our scientists themselves at an individual level. It's a wonderful opportunity for our scientists and colleagues that engage in these PPs to broaden their network, to have that rare opportunity to connect directly with the foremost expert, in whatever field. And those engagements help them to deepen their own knowledge, but also having that exposure to the diversity of thought that exists around the table helps them to think out of the box, see different perspectives, consider different perspectives, and opens their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that all also contributes to their credibility, both internally and externally. So internally, I've heard some scientists say I've become, being brought into certain meetings and discussions, whereas it didn't happen before. So
Nice.
It's a great opportunity for them to also develop and grow professionally.
Well, and we're all looking for meaning in our work and our lives, and so that obviously helps bring that to those scientists, which is awesome. Ed, how about from your vantage point?
Well, first I'd like to say I really like both aspects of Akiko's answer. Of course, getting input from the patients, obviously NORD is going to feel is essential, and also being able to connect the scientists who might not, be having these conversations otherwise with a broader set of stakeholders, a broader set of experts, are both really valuable. Since I'm a pediatric medical geneticist and I still see patients at Boston Children's Hospital and the chief medical and scientific officer at NORD, an organization dedicated now for nearly 40 years to rare diseases and trying to advance progress for all rare diseases, I particularly want to point out a special benefit for the rare diseases of consortia, especially of the pre-competitive sort that Akiko is mainly talking about, is breaking down silos and making sure that the data that exists is shared. In the case of a rare disease, you may only be able to run one good natural history study at a time. It's not like you're studying migraine headaches or atherosclerotic heart disease, and every major company in pharma could simultaneously run a big study on their own. They'd have plenty of patients. Patients feel lucky to get involved in any research on their rare disease, and they may be contributing to the only or the best data set on their disease, and they don't want to see it go just to one party or to be siloed away by one party. So these public-private consortiums are really attractive to rare diseases. Get several companies ideally looking at the data, and they may later on, as it moves out of the pre-competitive phase, take their different routes, but at least they are all involved in looking at the disease instead of it being siloed.
Cool.
And if I could just follow up on that point, for us and many other, industry partners, data is so critical to the work that we do. And I'm often hearing from our scientists the need for more data and what access can we get, to data sets to really help us advance our efforts. And so there are a number of PPPs, these pre-competitive collaborations that exist, but also, more to come, where we're really trying to tackle that incredible challenge of how do we share data, how do we connect data platforms, et cetera, so that more of this very valuable resource can be tapped into, so that we can really advance the science. So I know that for us, as well as many other companies, really leveraging and unleashing the power of data digital is really critical.
So the flip side, what are particular challenges that you encounter in either the formation of these relationships or living with them over time? Ed?
I think it's mainly the flip side of each of the benefits we've talked about. You end up with partners whose interests aren't really aligned, or partners who aren't really sharing. I suppose another challenge is, even if you have identified a target area, being able to find the funding and the willingness to go ahead and launch successfully.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Ed touched on a really good point about that strategic alignment. I think that is one of the most challenging aspects of these large collaborations, because you have so many stakeholders with very diverse perspectives coming to the table. And so really establishing that strong alignment across the many partners for any project, I think is a challenge, but it's really critical.
Mhm.
And I think one way to address it is really to ensure that the patient is at the table and that they remain engaged and stay engaged with the conversation, because I hear often from our scientists about how important it is to really understand the patient's needs. So I think one way to address the challenge is really encouraging the patients and patient organizations to stay engaged. And I think that gives us a good reminder to the reasons why we are all together collaborating on the particular project. And, at Takeda, we always say, patients are at the center of everything we do, and they truly are our North Star. And I think the more we have patients engaged in these collaborations, the more we will stay on the right track and keep going. In that, rather than obstacles stand in our way and hinder progress, we work on overcoming those obstacles.
Akiko, I would think there could be some awkward moments, shall I say, when your folks are at the table with people they would view often as competitors. I would wonder then about how people get past that barrier and to a trusting place where they can still share information and understand at the same time they're going to go their different ways in some fashion too.
Yeah, I think when we all come to the table, we recognize the fact that we're competitors in the industry, but I think because the spirit is very much about sharing openly and to innovate openly and have that open collaboration, we come with that spirit of sharing. And so I think that for all the partners there, it's really what motivates us and inspires us to do what we can to contribute.
A question from the audience, are there typically concrete milestones and metrics for these relationships? And can you maybe give examples of them, each of you? So Ed, you first.
Well, maybe Derek, I'll take this opportunity to introduce the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium that we wanted.
I was going to ask for us to make this real, so that's good.
That we wanted to talk about a little bit. So this is a new public-private partnership. Both Takeda and NORD are members of that partnership, which was really launched by the NIH, and multiple NIH centers and institutes are participating, as is CBER from the FDA. And it has very specific goals and milestones planned. In a nutshell, it's a public-private partnership organized by the NIH and the FDA with administrative assistance from the nonprofit foundation for the NIH, with initially about 10 biotech and industry partners, many of the companies that are most prominent in the gene therapy space and or most prominent in the rare and genetic disease spaces, as well as several nonprofit organizations, such as the American Society for Cell and Gene Therapy and NORD as an umbrella organization dedicated to advancing prospects for all patients with rare diseases. And that is the newest of several accelerating medicines partnerships, or AMPs, established by the FNIH, and they have well over a decade of experience in organizing these, and a lot of thought went into standing it up. People like Francis Collins, as he was directing the NIH, and PJ Brooks, who's now acting director of the Office of Rare Disease Research at NIH, and others, put a lot of thought into it. The concrete goals are to fund some laboratory research to improve our control over sort of the biology of AAV, to in parallel run 5 or 6 first-in-human gene therapy trials in diseases that are rare enough that companies would be unlikely to carry out these trials without a leg up from a public-private partnership. And yet diseases where we have enough scientific and clinical understanding to believe that a gene therapy has a high likelihood of success for those rare diseases. And in what was originally planned to be a 5-year program, but has been extended by the steering committee to a 6-year program, realizing the full complexity of things. The goal is to conduct these specific research studies and to conduct 5 or 6 first-in-human trials. At this point, we have narrowed the list of candidate diseases, but at about 11 months into the activity of the consortium, we haven't decided on the final list yet. And the consortium partners will manufacture the gene therapies, will follow as much as possible standardized preclinical testing and submit sort of standardized documentation to the FDA to try to streamline that process and make it easier for other entities to follow on afterwards. I'll just mention one other thing. I thought this was kind of colorful. Peter Marks, director of CBER at FDA, said on one of the steering calls, when people were getting excited about something very innovative and new, he reminded them that part of what we're looking for in the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium is, quote, vanilla AAV. We're particularly interested in establishing a real precedent for the idea that a lot of people have discussed, that maybe when there's an existing gene therapy that and you use the same viral capsid and you already understand its tropism for different tissues and its immunological properties, and all you do is change the therapeutic gene, that's not the most innovative treatment possible, but if that's all you're doing is changing the therapeutic gene, perhaps you can submit less in the way of new data and still ultimately get an FDA approval. And that really makes a lot of sense. We want to be the first or amongst the first to have that kind of thing where all we've done is change the therapeutic gene. So I guess I'm in a little bit of danger of having forgotten the original question.
Well, I think you've actually captured a bunch in it. The question was around what are the metrics for success, but I think you've just given us several. And I mean, and it sounds like ultimately perhaps a plug and play approach to AAV as a platform would certainly be a great outcome in and of itself.
Yeah. So the big metrics, of course, as I mentioned, are that those research studies get done during the scope of the initiative, that the clinical trials get launched so that we get at least the readout from the primary analysis period before the planned, cycle of activity that we're in right now.
So then, Akiko, tell us, please, from your vantage point, why Takeda decided this was something they wanted to be part of, and what are the processes that lead you in, and how are you going to evaluate your participation over time? So it's several questions there, but if you would please.
Well, for Takeda, it was really to contribute to the whole discussion and the project itself, because it is so important. And ultimately, what we're working on doing is all of us stakeholders that are engaged in this, we're trying to make progress and push that development forward in gene therapy. And so, as you know, Takeda, one of our therapeutic areas of focus on is rare diseases. Gene therapy is a big focus for us as well. And so it's a very unique opportunity for us to be at the table with other industry partners, with FDA, with some of the researchers and biotech companies to really understand how gene therapy should be manufactured. And so by focusing on these ultra rare diseases, we hope that this guidebook or playbook that will be one of the outputs of this project at the end will really help those who are developing gene therapies a path forward with their product. So it's really being part of that conversation and really helping to contribute to that ecosystem of advancing the development efforts in gene therapy rare disease space.
Very compelling. Stating the obvious, you have to have a long planning horizon, a long time horizon to think about participating in this sort of work. But obviously this is an industry that does just that. We have just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that each of you has the opportunity to just share a few thoughts that you want to make sure people come away with as they think about these sorts of relationships as part of the overall product development continuum. Akiko, I'll start with you.
Okay. For me, based on my own experience of having worked on or worked with many different sectors and stakeholders regarding public-private partnerships, there are a few things that I've learned. One is that it is really important to seek out like-minded partners, because that'll make it easier for achieving that strategic alignment and alignment within all the partners of the project. And then also to have a plan in place for how you're going to sustain the project. So lots and lots of resources are being contributed to these public-private partnerships. And when the project comes to an end, there should be a plan in place for how to sustain all the progress made and to continue that progress forward. Building that capacity to do that smooth transition really needs to be part of the plan of the project, not an afterthought. So I often say, make sure you have your exit plan before your project even launches. But I think it's through all of this that I think at the core of all of these efforts, it's trust. That it's really, really important to build that trust with the partners, which helps to build trust with society as well. So I think at the end of the day, it really does come back to very human elements like ensuring that you have trust.
Sure.
And for us, it's really patients at the center. So no matter what we do, we are always thinking about the patients, and that's why we are trying to advance the science, accelerate these processes.
Well, thanks, Akiko. I appreciate that. It's a very thoughtful answer. Ed, from your vantage point, what?
Well, I think if I hit one closing note, it would be to perhaps make more explicit something we've already touched on or danced around a little bit, which is that the real best purpose of a public-private partnership is to get something done that couldn't be done without it, or is very unlikely to be done without it. And so, making sure that rare disease data doesn't get siloed is one of those challenges that would be hard to get around without a public-private partnership set up in the right way, as Akiko was saying, with like-minded partners willing to share, and tackling gene therapies for rare diseases for which the economic model is not clear, especially if you had to do all the development on your own. These are things that probably couldn't be done without a public-private partnership. So perhaps if you find yourself with an admirable goal that's hard to achieve, a public-private partnership might be a way to get there.
Outstanding. Thank you. Thank you to both of you for, I think, a really nice discussion, thoughtful, and I'm sure people came away with some helpful thoughts as they look at, again, how we get from point A to point Z, and there's a lot in between. I will point out to the folks online that Sarah Chang has put in a link to the bespoke website, it appears. So for those of you who want to get more information, click on that. And with that, I'll just say thanks so much, Akiko and Ed. I really appreciate this time with you both.